Hi, I'm Caroline. 9 years ago, my family erased me like I never existed. I disappeared quietly, carrying nothing but shame and a silence so heavy it felt like a stone in my chest. When I finally returned, stepping back into a life that had moved on without me, my mom's eyes narrowed. In front of everyone we had ever known, she snapped, "Why is this failure here?" But she had no idea what I'd become. She had no idea that the world she was standing in was one I had built. It started the day I turned 19. It wasn't a loud, dramatic fight. There was no screaming match, no slamming doors. It was much quieter and much crueler. I came home from my shift at the local library to find the door to my bedroom closed. That was strange. My door was never closed. When I tried the handle, it was locked. Before we dive into this, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down a perfectly clean counter. She didn't look up. "Mom? My door is locked," I said, my voice sounding small in the silent house. She finished wiping the counter, folded the cloth, and placed it by the sink. Only then did she turn to me. Her face was a blank mask, the one she wore when she was deeply disappointed, which was most of the time when she looked at me. "That's not your room anymore, Caroline," she said. Her tone was flat, like she was telling me we were out of milk. "It's for storage now." I stood there, completely stunned. Storage? But where are my things? A small, tight smile touched her lips. "We sold what we could. The rest was donated. You won't be needing those things anymore." The floor felt like it was tilting beneath my feet. My books, my clothes, my journals, the stupid little snow globe my grandmother had given me. Gone. Everything that made me, packed up and sold off like I was already dead. My father walked in then, holding a small cardboard box. He set it on the floor between us. It was heavy with the finality of their decision. "Here," he said, his voice gruff. He couldn't meet my eyes. "This is what's left. You have 1 hour to be out of this house." Inside the box were a few old t-shirts, a toothbrush, and my high school diploma. A document that suddenly felt like a joke. My sister Emily stood in the doorway to the living room, a faint smirk on her face. She was the golden child, the one who did everything right. She was heading to a prestigious university while I was working part-time and taking classes at a community college. A path my parents called a waste of time. I looked from my mother's cold face to my father's averted gaze to my sister's triumphant smirk. "Why?" I whispered. The word felt like it was torn from my throat. My mother finally looked at me and her eyes were like chips of ice. "Because we're done," she said. "We are done funding a disappointment. We told the neighbors you'd moved away in disgrace. As far as anyone is concerned, you no longer belong to this family." Disgrace. The word echoed in the silent house. I didn't know what I had done to earn it, other than not being Emily. A few weeks later, after I had found a room to rent across town, I saw a new family photo posted online. It was my parents and Emily, smiling brightly on the front porch. They were standing closer together than usual, filling the space where I used to be. My picture had been taken down from the mantelpiece. My name was never mentioned. I wasn't just kicked out. I was erased. I had become a ghost in the story of my own family. The first few years were the hardest. The world is a cold place when you have no one and nothing. I learned that quickly. I took any job I could find. I was a waitress in a greasy spoon diner where the smell of burnt coffee clung to my clothes. I worked the graveyard shift at a gas station under flickering fluorescent lights, watching lonely cars pass on the highway. I cleaned office buildings late at night, pushing a mop through empty hallways. My reflection the only company I had. I slept in borrowed rooms, on lumpy couches, and for a few terrifying weeks, in the back of my beat-up car. I was always tired, always hungry, always one missed paycheck away from being on the street. But the physical hardship was nothing compared to the loneliness. The pain of being forgotten was a constant dull ache in my chest. Every holiday was a fresh wound. On Thanksgiving, while I ate a lukewarm cup of instant noodles in my tiny room, I'd scroll through my phone. I'd see pictures of my family gathered around a massive dining table. There was my father carving a turkey. There was my mother smiling, raising a glass of wine. There was Emily, surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles, all of them laughing as if I had never been born. No one ever asked where I was. No one seemed to notice the empty chair. Christmas was worse. I'd see them in matching pajamas, opening presents under a glittering tree. Emily got a new car one year. I saw the picture of her standing beside it, a giant red bow on the hood. That same day, I had worked a double shift just to make rent, and my landlord had still yelled at me for being a day late. The silence from them was absolute. No calls, no texts, not even an angry email. It was as if the moment I walked out that door with my small box, I had simply vanished from the earth. I sent my mother a card for her birthday one year. I just wrote, "Thinking of you." I never knew if she even received it. I got no reply. The lack of response was its own answer. You do not exist. You are nothing to us. That silence hollowed me out, leaving me feeling worthless and ashamed, as if they were right to throw me away. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday night. I was working as a janitor at a tech company downtown. It was a fancy place with glass walls and beanbag chairs. I was cleaning the main conference room after a late meeting. The executives had left behind a mess of pizza boxes and empty bottles. One of them, a man named Mr. Harrison, who was known for being particularly arrogant, had forgotten his briefcase. He came back for it just as I was wiping down the long, polished table. He looked at me, or rather, through me, with a dismissive sneer. "Hurry it up," he grumbled, grabbing his briefcase. He paused and looked at my worn-out sneakers and frayed jeans. A cruel laugh escaped his lips. "You know, I see people like you and it just makes me feel better about my own life. God, what a mess!" He turned to his colleague who had waited by the door. "Some people are just born to be trash, right?" His colleague chuckled nervously. The word hung in the air. Trash. It wasn't the first time I'd been insulted. It wasn't the worst thing anyone had ever said to me. But that night, something inside me broke. I finished cleaning the room in a daze, my hands shaking. I walked home in the pouring rain, not even feeling the cold water soaking through my thin jacket. All I could hear was his laugh. All I could feel was the weight of my mother's words. Disappointment. Disgrace. They were all connected. In their eyes, I was nothing. A failure. Trash to be thrown away and forgotten. I stood in front of the cracked mirror in my small bathroom, water dripping from my hair onto the floor. I looked at the tired girl staring back at me, at the dark circles under her eyes, at the slump in her shoulders. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt rage. A cold, hard, quiet rage. It was a vow I made to that girl in the mirror. I would never be small again. I would never let someone else's opinion of me define my worth. I would never again wait for someone to save me or feel sorry for me. I would never beg. Not for a job, not for respect, and certainly not for a family's love. That night, the shame that had been my constant companion for years burned away, leaving behind something new, pure, unyielding determination. Survival wasn't enough anymore. I was going to build a life so solid that no one could ever knock it down again. My climb was not a fairy tale. It was a slow, grueling, and silent war I waged against my circumstances. The day after my vow, I walked into the public library. Not as an employee this time, but as a student. I used their free computers to sign up for online coding classes. I studied relentlessly, my world shrinking to the glow of a computer screen. I still worked my menial jobs. I'd clean offices until 2 a.m., then go home and study until my eyes burned. I'd serve breakfast at the diner from 6 a.m., my mind still running through lines of code. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My fuel was cheap coffee and the memory of Mr. Harrison's sneer. My first break was small, a freelance gig building a simple website for a local bakery. They paid me $300. It was more money than I had ever held in my hand that I had earned with my mind, not just my labor. I cried when I held it. It wasn't just money. It was proof. One small job led to another. I was reliable, I was fast, and I was good. I saved every single penny that wasn't for rent or instant noodles. I bought a better laptop. I took more advanced courses, specializing in cybersecurity. It felt fitting. My whole life I had felt unprotected, exposed. Now my job was to find weaknesses and build walls to protect others. After a few years, I had saved enough to quit my other jobs and focus entirely on my tech career. I co-founded a small startup with 2 other people I met in an online forum. Our office was my tiny apartment. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by a shared dream and a mountain of debt. We built a new kind of security software, one that could protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. The big break came from a place I never expected. A government agency was looking for a next-generation security system. Everyone told us we were too small, too unknown to even try. But we put in a bid, and somehow we won. The contract was huge. It changed everything. Overnight, my little startup exploded. We got investors. We hired employees. We moved into a real office, a beautiful modern space with glass walls, not unlike the one I used to clean. By the time I was 27, my company, Carter Security, was valued at over $200 million. I was the CEO, but no one in my old life knew. I never changed my name, but I had built a new identity, one so far removed from the forgotten girl that they felt like two different people. After 9 years of complete and total silence, the invitation arrived. It came as an email, forwarded by a distant cousin who was clearly out of the family's inner loop. She must have had my old email address saved and included me in a mass message. It was an invitation to a large family banquet celebrating my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. My first instinct was to delete it. Why would I go? Why would I subject myself to their judgment and their cold stares? I had built a life without them. I didn't need them, but something stopped me. I sat in my spacious, quiet office, staring at the invitation on my screen. I wasn't that broken 19-year-old girl anymore. I wasn't the tired, humiliated janitor. I was Caroline Carter, CEO. Their words couldn't hurt me. Their opinions didn't matter. It wasn't about revenge. I had long since let go of that. Revenge felt loud and messy, and my success was quiet and clean. This was about something else. Closure. I needed to walk into that room, not as the ghost they had created, but as myself. I needed to close that chapter of my life on my own terms, to see them one last time and walk away knowing I was truly free. So, I RSVP'd. Just one word. Attending. I decided to go simply. I wore a plain black dress, something elegant but understated. No expensive jewelry, no flashy watch. I drove myself, not in the luxury car my company provided, but in a simple sedan. I didn't want to walk in there flaunting my success. I just wanted to walk in as Caroline. I wanted to see if they could see me, the person I had become, not the failure they had cast out. I walked into the banquet hall, and a hush fell over the room. Heads turned. Whispers started like a ripple in a pond. I saw my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Their faces were a mixture of shock and confusion. For a moment, it felt like a ghost had truly walked in. Then I saw my mother. She was standing with my sister Emily by the head table. Her smile froze on her face, and her eyes narrowed into thin slits. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple dress, my quiet demeanor. Whatever she saw, it confirmed the stories she had been telling herself for 9 years. She strode toward me, her heels clicking angrily on the polished floor. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask where I'd been. She stopped a few feet in front of me, making sure everyone could hear. Her voice was sharp, dripping with venom. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Who invited you?" Before I could answer, she scoffed, a cruel, ugly sound. She turned to the nearby relatives, her voice rising for effect. "Why is this failure here? Can't we have one nice evening without being embarrassed?" My sister laughed behind her, a high tinkling sound that was meant to cut. "She probably wants money," Emily whispered loudly to a cousin. "She still looks pathetic." Laughter spread through the tables closest to us. It wasn't loud, just a series of awkward, pitying chuckles. My chest tightened. The old familiar sting of humiliation pricked at my eyes. For a split second, I was that 19-year-old girl again, standing in the kitchen with a box at my feet. But then I looked at my mother's twisted face, at my sister's smug expression, and the feeling passed. It was replaced by a profound, unshakable calm. They hadn't changed at all, but I had. I stood there silently as their words washed over me. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say a word. I just watched them. Just as my mother opened her mouth to say something else, a man in a sharp suit appeared at my side. He was the manager of the banquet venue, a high-end exclusive hotel I had acquired a year ago as a real estate investment for my company. He ignored my mother completely and addressed me with quiet deference. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice clear and professional, cutting through the whispers. "I apologize for the wait. The private floor is ready for you and your guests whenever you are." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother froze, her mouth still slightly open. Her eyes darted from the manager back to me, confusion clouding her features. "Miss Carter?" she repeated, the name sounding foreign on her tongue. The manager nodded politely. "Yes, Ms. Carter owns the building." He gestured subtly, and I noticed for the first time what no one else had. the small, discreet logo embroidered on the lapels of all the staff members' uniforms. It was the logo for Carter Security. My logo. My mother followed my gaze and saw it. Her face, which had been twisted in a sneer just moments before, went completely pale. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking old and slack-jawed. My sister's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Across the room, I could see the expressions shifting on every face, from pity and mockery to awe and disbelief. The whispers started again, but this time their tone was entirely different. The shift was instantaneous and sickening. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in a decade were rushing to my side. "Caroline! My goodness, look at you! We've missed you so much!" An aunt gushed. Trying to wrap me in a hug, I stiffly sidestepped. "We always knew you had it in you," my uncle stammered, his eyes wide with a mixture of greed and shock. "We were just saying—" My mother was speechless, her hands fluttering at her sides. My father, who had been hiding in the background, finally shuffled forward, his face a mess of confusion and regret. "Caroline, we didn't know." "Didn't know what? That I wasn't a failure? That my worth was tied to a bank account and a building deed?" I looked at their frantic, desperate faces. They weren't seeing me. They were seeing money, power, and opportunity. They were seeing a story they could now brag about instead of one they had to hide. I gave them a small, sad smile. I turned to my mother, the woman who had called me a failure just minutes before. Her eyes were pleading now. "You erased me once," I said, my voice soft but steady, carrying across the silent room. "Stay consistent." Their faces fell. The fake smiles crumbled. My words hung in the air, a final, quiet judgment. The manager gently touched my elbow. "This way, Ms. Carter." He escorted me away from the stunned crowd, toward a private elevator at the far end of the hall. As the doors slid shut, I saw my family one last time, standing frozen in the middle of a party that was no longer about them. They were left behind in the world they had made, while I ascended to the one I had built for myself. Abandonment once broke me. It hollowed me out and left me with nothing but shame. But silence, hard work, and a quiet refusal to be defined by those who threw me away rebuilt me into someone stronger than I ever thought possible. That night I didn't feel anger or triumph. I just felt peace. The chapter was finally truly closed. So, I have to ask you, would you forgive them? Or would you stay silent as I did? Tell me what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you believe that erasure can never stop destiny.